Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jason Lewis, the producer of the From the Shadows podcast. Tonight, I'm pleased to bring to you two very special guests who are friends of the From the Shadows podcast crew and have taken time from their busy schedule to give us this insightful interview. It is my pleasure to bring to you actor, stuntman, and former professional wrestler Chris Hahn. And our other guest is a director, writer, and visual effects producer who has such credits to his name as Boogeyman 3, Axe Giant, The Wrath of Paul Bunyan, and my personal favorite big bug movie, Mosquito, and the highly anticipated Escape from Death Block 13. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Gary Jones with us tonight. Without further ado, let me turn you over to your host, Shane Grove, so that we can get started with this insightful roundtable style interview.
Welcome to the From the Shadows podcast. I'm your host, Shane Grove, and today's episode we're going to welcome two very special guests. You don't agree with me? Special guest
I
number
agree
one?
with you 100%.
Okay. So our guests today are, let's count down. Former professional wrestler, current stuntman, current, can we say bodybuilder? Are you currently?
Well, not currently, yeah,
Okay.
I guess you'd say.
Well, he's working on his body. It's not. And an actor, Chris Hahn, North Central Ohio, Mansfield's own Chris Hahn.
Thank you.
And then we also have acclaimed director, producer, writer, visual effects artist, Gary Jones, who's also from the area.
Howdy, howdy.
Thanks, guys, for coming in here today and talking with us.
Cool. Thanks for having us.
It's great to have you guys here. Being a big fan of movies, especially horror genre films, obviously. I think a lot of people who enjoy films have no idea how a film was actually made. And I got the privilege to come over to one of Gary and Chris's new films going to be coming out. I'll let them explain that here in a little bit. And got to see how a movie's made and get to be in a couple scenes. Very interesting. It was one of those things that I had no idea how movies were really made. So, Gary, you want to give us just the people who are listening just a little bit of an outline of how you make a movie and how hard it is to make a movie. And that was the thing that kind of threw me, is that how many different times you have to do a scene to get it right, and the different angles and the special effects. So.
Well, you probably saw, I was figuring out as we went along. I don't know how to make movies. We just make it up as we go along. But no, actually, it's kind of interesting because, we started shooting the movie. And we got pretty much through our production period of the shooting, we were starting to put together all the second unit and the pickup shoots, all the little bits and pieces that we fill in to the main shoot. But basically, making movies is, there's like a recipe, or there's like a game plan you follow. And all movies are kind of done this way. You start out with a script, and you go through the basics of planning it all, figuring out what you need, doing your casting, pick your locations, put together a shooting schedule, figure out, well, how are you going to cover a scene? How many setups and shots? And basically you break it down like that, and you have to get all these pieces of the puzzle. And, going through production, for me as a filmmaker, I always read the script and I watch the movie in my head. And I go, I'm watching it and I figure out, okay, that's a close-up, that's a medium, you cut to this, you move to that. So as I play the movie in my head, as I'm reading it or writing it, then I sit down and draw like thumbnail storyboards of like where all the shots are. And then when I get that finished, I look at it and go, oh, this is 25 different setups, camera setups to get that coverage. And so you really it's a breakdown like that. The thing that, for me, that always works the best is figure out, I watch that movie in my head and I figure out what's the least amount I need to do to get that done. Because you got to think about, if you're building a set, well, how much of the set do you build? It's also about a budget. You want to spend as little as possible to get the biggest return. So I go, well, if I'm not seeing the ceiling, don't build the ceiling, right? So I try to look at it from that point of like, what's the minimal amount I need to tell the story, to make things work, and then kind of just start breaking it down and bringing the different crew people in that do the different jobs and hiring the different people and putting it together. So it's really, it's a game plan. It's a real battle. It's like fighting a war. You gotta plan it all out, and the key to all of it is you have to plan it. You have to have everything there, but then once you actually start shooting, that's it. The clock is ticking. You only have so much time in a day, so much time in a location, so much money, and you have to get the goods. You have to get enough to put the story together, and it's always a challenge to like get through a movie, get to the end, and go, did I get it all? Am I telling the story I wanted to tell? Is it better than what I thought or not? And so it's a challenge, and you never kind of know till the end. I mean, I have a good idea where it's all going to end up, and I'm always amazed at the end how all the happy accidents happen during a shoot that makes the film better, things that I could have never even thought of. So
as a storyteller, how old were you when you finally realized, hey, this is what I want to do? I want to tell stories. Because I think I guess that's, as a director, as a producer, I think that's really kind of how I see it, is you're telling a story that you think people would like to see.
Yeah, it's interesting. As a kid growing up, everybody was playing football or working on cars and stuff, and I sat in front of the TV and watched Sir Graves Ghastly and The Ghoul, and watched all these creature features and these movies from from King Kong all the way up to Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and I'd watch these things and get lost in these new worlds, these stories, and then when the movie was over with, I'd be snapped back to reality. I go, wow, okay. So you could tell a story. You could come up with an idea. So probably, I'm going to say, maybe 11 or 12. I kind of knew that that's where I wanted to go. I didn't know how it was done, and it, took me years to figure out how you actually made this stuff work. But as a kid growing up, I would always draw comics and stuff and cartoons. So I was always kind of telling stories, and my mother had a Super 8 movie camera. So I'd always borrow that and taught myself how to make a movie. I would shoot stuff and get the film back from Kmart after it came in, then cut it all together and see what worked. So it was really, I knew I wanted to tell stories. I didn't know how, I didn't know what stories to tell, but I always kind of went to the horror, the science fiction, the adventure, the action, Bridge on the River Kwai. I knew we could blow things up or make a giant rubber monster. Those were always the attractive things as a kid. You always kind of went to those. So that was going to be my focus. I'm like, all right, figure out how do you tell a story? What's a story to tell? And how about giant mosquitoes, So it was like trying to get to that. So probably at a really early age. And I think a lot of people who get into either entertainment or just different things, movies, music, anything, it kind of starts at an early age. There's something there, whether you know what it is, whether you recognize that that's what you want to do, you're attracted to it. And if you can focus at a young age on something that forget about making $1 million. Focus on something that really drives you and inspires you. And then you really get into it, and you can figure out a way how to make that your career or your life's work. And that was kind of me, was just trying to figure it out. And then it kind of hit me. I'm like, oh, it's the director. He's the guy behind the scenes. He's telling everybody what to do. He's planning this. He's doing that. I'm like, so I love all the jobs, but get to the director's chair, and I get to do everything. I get to work with the actors. I get to build the sets. I get to do all of it. So it took me a few years, but probably by the time I was 15, 16, a movie called Jaws came out. And got my driver's license, went to the theater and saw Jaws, and I went, wow, Steven Spielberg's like 25, 26 years old, and he's directing these movies. I'm like, that's the job. That's where I'm going, And I thought, oh, well, I got a few years here. By the time I'm 26, I'll be in Hollywood making movies. Well, when I was 36, I started making my first movie. So, you have a drive and a goal. It's figuring out how to get there. Because there's no roadmap. There's really no roadmap. You're kind of making it up as you go.
So I wanted to go back to where you said, you borrowed your mom's 8mm, Super 8 or whatever. Mm-hmm. The technology today, where you could probably basically make a better movie with your cell phone,
absolutely,
on your iPad or whatever. do you ever wonder, man, what could I have done when I was 13, 14 years old with that versus, or did having to do stuff a little more creatively and a little more, I guess at that time that's not old school, but that way, and build, to make a story, do you think that made you better at doing this now? Because does that seem so easy to do with your phone that it would have made people a little bit lazy?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've talked with a lot of people about this because, when I started, we would shoot film. There was a real magic back then. To get actually a movie made and out there where people could see, you would have to shoot 35 millimeter. All that stuff cost so much money, and you had to know how to work it. And everybody had a specialty, the cameraman, the lighting, the sound. There was so many specialties involved and so many people that not everybody could do it. So when you actually got a hold of a camera as a kid and shot something, took the Super 8 film to Kmart, waited 2 weeks and got it back, and some of it's in focus or whatever, and you actually cut it and tape it together and run it in a projector, you saw the magic. And you built it, right? You could feel it, and you're like, that's it. There's magic there. And so you strive to well, how do you get to the next level? I need to get money. I need to bring other people in. And what it forced me to do was figure it out. We can pick up a cell phone. I can make a movie with my cell phone right now. But the two things that are exactly the same, even though you can do that, what's the story you're telling? Are you entertaining somebody? Unfortunately for me today, people will watch our movies on the cell phone, and then they'll put it down and pick it up and watch it again, and they only pay 99 cents for it if they've paid for it. Yeah. Well, when I started and I made my first movie, people would have to go to a theater to see it, or they would have to buy that VHS tape for like $40. So you actually could make big money if you could get in and get your movies out there. So the flip side is it was harder to do. But once you got there, you could make money. Today, it's easier to make a movie. It's still harder to entertain people. It's harder to make, because everybody can do it. Yep. You've got to cut through the noise.
Yeah, it's the same in music, too. It's the same in any kind of artistic medium almost when it comes to that.
Well, we used to, with the Super 8 was, we started out trying to figure, well, how do we entertain or shock people? Well, we were into all the monsters and effects, so we're like, okay, we love the war movies. How do we do people being shot? So we would, not to give anything away, but we had firecrackers back in the day, and we figured out how to make squibs, bullet hits with firecrackers and blood bags, and we taped all over people and wires everywhere, and that's how we made our war pictures, right? It was a version of how Hollywood did it. Well, today, I do visual effects as one of my jobs that I do, as my side job is, in the entertainment stuff. And I add bullet hits and muzzle flashes in visual effects, whereas back in the day, we'd have to have blanks and pyrotechnics on actors. So it's safer today, and it looks cool and everything, and it's a different skill set. But it's exactly what I did when I started out. I'm actually doing that same thing again now for other people and making a living at it and able to do my own movies too. So yeah, I often wonder if I had this digital equipment back then, maybe I would have made that first movie at 25, 26 instead of 36. I'm going to cut 10 years out of the run.
So now do you appreciate how hard it would have been for Spielberg to make that movie Jaws?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you don't think about it because you watch the movie, but if you've ever been in a boat on the water, it's hard enough to just make a movie with two people standing in a room talking, right? Because they get the dialogue gets messed up, or the sound's off, or the camera's out of focus. Be on a boat, a moving boat, and work with actors and crew, and everybody has to hit marks and do things, and you're on an object that does not sit still. So you go, holy cow, how the hell did they do that? Without going crazy.
And
it was incredibly difficult.
The shark didn't cooperate so famously is what, when you read about that.
And made it a better movie.
Yeah.
Because you didn't see it.
No.
And
it's
when
that
you did,
whole less is more thing that and we've talked about because obviously Grover and I, we work, we're writing scripts
Mm-hmm.
and trying to come up with good stories, and a lot of times we get into this debate about less is more.
Mm-hmm.
If you show the creature, if you show the monster too much, it loses its magic. It loses its how scary it is. You become,
does.
you know, you become used to it. So
Well, you have today too. You have it's kind of the two schools of thought of like, you know, like in Jaws when I watched it and everything, and the movie was great. And I can tell you to this day, the very first time I saw it, at like 16 years old, I could see the one or two the shark that looked fake. There's one or two shots in that movie that just jumped out and went, I knew it was a rubber. I knew they made a monster shark and built it out of rubber and fiberglass. And there's one or two shots that looked a little fake to me, but the other ones looked really good. So even though I didn't know how it was all put together, I could still see through it. But the fact that you didn't see it, in my mind, I made the coolest, scariest, biggest damn shark swimming around in that water in my head that was not on screen. So if you can bring an audience into something, and that's kind of goes back to like what I said when you make a movie or if you're doing music or anything, if you can lull the audience into it and take them down a path and then put little signposts in there for them to use their imagination. See, because you can't never do what they can do in somebody's mind. But if you can trigger enough people to go down that path, they're going to fill in the gaps and do things you could never do. And then the flip side too is, you go to watch the Marvel movies or whatever, and you want to see Iron Man, and you want to see the buildings exploding and everybody fighting and flipping in slow motion, and just or a Michael Bay movie where everything's blowing up, like a ballet, and you want to see it all, or Transformers. And then there's the other thing with who's outside the door. Who's
what
that
lurks
scratching
in the
on
shadows.
in your head.
There you go.
You can never top what's Hollywood can't. We can't do that, but we can trigger the audience to use their own imagination and fill it in.
We bring
for us.
Chris in. I think
Speaking
it's
of
time
less is more.
More or less.
Wow. I think that's the longest time I've ever been quiet in my life.
Indeed.
There's a debate, I think, that's out there amongst fans, and I don't know if there's a debate amongst directors, movie makers, and you guys can answer this question. And I remember J.J. Abrams was talking about when they brought him in to redo Star Wars, and he had shown his kids the originals, and then he showed them the next ones, and the kids, when they saw the puppet, they were like, "Oh, it's alive! It really, Yoda's real. He's real." And so, I've heard people debate, and to bring Chris in this, is that there's this new wave maybe of going back to, hey, we like being able to see the creature. We want the makeup. We want the guy in the suit versus the special effects monster.
Exactly.
So, and Chris, so you've played monsters, and creatures, and things like that. So
Now, it was being the clown was different because all it is just putting paint on your face, which is still kind of creepy.
you reference in the movie Clown
Town, yeah. But being an axe giant and having to wear a full body foam prosthetic latex suit was crazy because, number one, the film is never shot in sequence. So this was the first movie I was ever doing. And we do this shot, and then we do this shot, and I'm sitting there scratching my head, and I'm like, this is going to look like crap because I didn't understand how he was putting it together.
Oh, you've seen some of my other movies.
But when I saw the finished product, it was like, it kind of blew me away. And but being in that foam latex prosthetic suit, and it was 95 degrees during the day, I remember Gary sitting there saying, we're going to unzip your back, we're going to pack you full of ice, because when you put the suit on, you can't take it off. They only make a couple of them. And those suits are pretty expensive. And so I would sit in front of a fan, and I'd have ice packed in my back, and then they need me on set, they'd zip me up and stick me back out in 90-degree weather. Was it a great experience? Yeah. Was it an exhausting experience? I lost about 20 pounds in like 3 or 4 days, and I drank, God, how much Gatorade did I drink? I mean, I drank a lot of Gatorade. And the crazy thing is, never went to the restroom because my body would sweat it all out. I was constantly sweating. And but it was probably one of the best experiences I ever had, because if it wasn't for Gary, then I wouldn't have never started my movie career. And it was crazy the way I got started, because a friend of a friend by the name of Bud Moffat, which I give a lot of credit to, Gary came up to him and asked him if he knew a big guy that had some kind of stamina and that could do a monster character for me. And Bud recommended me, and I went over and I met Gary for the first time, and he had me go through a little routine to see if I could fall and do all this stuff. And then he goes, now you got to wear a big monster foam suit and all this and that. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? And my dad was in a nursing home at the time, and he was passing. And I went and I talked to him. I said,
It was about the money, too.
it didn't pay much. But my dad said, you know, he might, and I always remember this. My dad said, give it a try. You never know what it's like. And he goes, sometimes money's not everything. Do something that you wake up in the morning and enjoy doing. It puts a smile on your face. And so I went on set, and like I said, how many days did I work on X Giant?
Well, you in the suit, you were about 4 days.
4 days.
Actually, about almost 5. We did
Right.
the extra one. And then you did a couple, you played
Cameos.
a couple cameos in
Right.
as a militia guy.
Right, a militia guy, and I was in a bar drinking a beer,
You
too.
shot yourself in the movie.
Yeah, I shot myself in the movie, which not many actors can say they did that.
Exactly.
But if it wasn't for Gary, I wouldn't be doing what I do now. And I originally started off as a stunt guy. And a buddy of mine, Dave Hutchinson, lives out in California. He does lots of stunts. He's in everything. When I had a brain tumor, about 5 years ago, and I couldn't do the wrestling anymore. And I gave him up a call, and we were talking and stuff. And I said, man, I wouldn't mind trying to do stunts. You know, because it's all safety first. And you wear harnesses and stuff like that. And the doctor said I couldn't wrestle anymore. And he goes, Chris, you've been a stuntman for 28 years. Professional wrestling is all stunts. Give it a try. So started doing the stunt work, and then I got hooked in with Gary and did my first movie. And it's been a blessing ever since. I mean, I love what I do.
For our wrestling fans out there, and there's the wrestling fans that are going to wear the T-shirts, and then there's the secret wrestling fans
that wear the robes.
at home like I am. Can you just, for those listeners out there, give us some of the more famous people that you
Yeah,
wrestled?
well, I wrestled as a character by the name of Johnny Paradise. I was 6'2", 255 pounds of twisted steel and sex appeal. That was my ring introduction. I was the cocky, arrogant SOB that nobody liked. People spit on, threw things at me, all this and that. But I always played the bad guy. I played the bad guy. And the bad guy is always the way to go. Now, in the movies, I also play the bad guy. And I prefer it. Like in a new movie that's coming out, which I'll let Gary talk about, I play the Johnny Paradise character just with a different name. Loudmouth, thinks he runs the show, thinks nobody can stand up to him.
A bully.
Bully, basically. And and it was like, I didn't really have to learn anything from the part, which was kind of nice because the 28 years of being a professional wrestler, that's what I did. I was the loudmouth. I was the show-off. I was the guy that thought nobody could beat him, you know? So,
Am I right on this? I know you wrestled The Undertaker.
yes.
Did you wrestle Ric Flair?
Okay, I wrestled The Undertaker, the Nasty Boys. I wrestled Ric Flair. I wrestled Ronnie Garvin. I wrestled a guy by the name of Papa Shango, which caught me on fire.
Road Warriors.
The Road Warriors, the Hart Brothers. I went down to WCW for a while, and I wrestled the Steiner Brothers, Dan Spivey, Sting. So I've wrestled a lot of the big name guys. Did I win a lot of matches? No. But I was on national television, and like being in the WCW, WWF is like playing in the NFL. There's no higher. But I was like second or third string guy. I was more of a low card, mid card guy. And then eventually I kind of worked my way up where I won a few matches every now and then. I got to show a little bit of what I could do. And it was great working with those guys, traveling from town to town, you know.
So the best part about you wrestling for me is so I've known you ever since we were about freshmen in high school.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, we always play Lexington and basketball. In fact, the only time I've got kicked out of a game was during a freshman game because you wanted to wrestle me during the basketball game, and we both got tossed. But I don't know, we've been graduated 4 or 5 years. And
30.
No. At this time, there's an illusion here, right? And
In the shadows.
so there used to be a sporting goods store there in the Richland Mall, and it was remember there was like Foot Locker, and then the second
Agler Davidson?
Agler Davidson, and I'm at Agler Davidson, and I'm buying a shirt, and I look up, and behind the counter is Chris Hahn. His picture, he's in a wrestling, and it says Johnny Paradise. Now, you had a much more cooler tagline that you just gave everybody, but on that photo, I remember it said Johnny Paradise, every man's nightmare, every woman's dream.
Exactly.
So that is the tagline that I remember seeing that going, who is this guy kidding?
I thought it was
My brother used to work at Henry Davidson, so I had someone behind the scenes put a picture of
I thought it was every woman's fantasy.
Well, it could be that too.
Same thing. Whatever. Dream, fantasy, come on.
But no,
It's all paradise.
Since I've done my first movie, I got to work with John Travolta in Criminal Activities, where I played his bodyguard, and I did some stunt work in that. I got to do a little bit on Captain America. I did a little bit of stunt work on that. And then I did an episode of House of Cards. I played a Secret Service agent, and I got to work with Robin Penn Wright, which was, right? Is it Robin Penn Wright? Yeah. Which is
Robin Wright Penn.
Robin Wright Penn. Yeah, Sean Penn's ex-wife. And then I just did a movie where I got to work with Zac Efron in an extremely wicked and vile Ted Bundy story, which was cool because
Actually, we'll watch it on Netflix. It was nice.
yeah, it was fun to watch. And then got to work in Gary's movie. I did Clown Town. I did Inoperable.
What was the one that was down in Kentucky?
Old Man with a Gun.
Old Man with a Gun with Robert Redford. I got to work one-on-one with Robert Redford, which was great. I got to have a fight scene with Ewan McGregor and knock him out, which is cool because I got to knock out Obi-Wan Kenobi. So,
The really cool thing though is that your career basically got started because Gary did things the old school way and put you in a suit where you could have easily made that a digital.
Yeah, and I'm glad you went back to that, what you were talking about earlier, which was it really is the thing that audiences, people pick up on this. We know the video games are so prevalent today, and we played Asteroids back in the day and Pong, right? Well, today it's like they're phenomenal. Everybody knows what they are, and they see it. And I really believe when people watch movies, even young kids, they know they're seeing an effect because it's 24/7 now. And I think as humans, when you can connect and you can go, that's a CG that they're making, they just brought back Robert De Niro. They redid his makeup and everything. They make him look a lot younger. That's not really him, right? They're doing something in effects. So I think by having real people, real tangible monsters, rubber monsters or things on camera, there's nuances that you can't, CG can do everything, right? But boy, oh boy, you watch it and you go, it's too perfect. That's not real. That's not, you'll see something blow up in CG and you go, it's amazing, but it's not real, right? Because there's a randomness that just doesn't happen. And I think people can connect with that. And so when we were doing Axe Giant, Wrath of Paul Bunyan, we had a small budget, and the idea is, well, how do we do a giant guy? Well, of course, my first thought was, well, we always used to build miniatures and stuff. Why don't we make the sets smaller and make the guy bigger, put him in a monster suit? So instead of compositing and putting in this giant monster into the scenes, no, we'll take the people we shoot on green screen and we'll make them small and put them in next to Chris, who's 18, 20 foot tall. And we'll put miniature cabins and miniature set pieces. And we'll use the digital world to marry the images together, but they're two real images put together. So there is 2 shots in the movie that are CG of Bunyan, and they're very quick and very small. Everything else is Chris Hahn in his suit, whether he's falling, jumping, hanging, all that stuff. And I think the audiences connect with that. So I feel like there is a trend to go back to that now. You'll see, I have a lot of friends that do makeup effects. They've been doing it for years. There's a big resurgence about putting makeup on actors, building creatures and monsters and sets and different things. Ridley Scott does this a lot. He has a lot of, he does the Alien movies and whatnot, Gladiator. He has a lot of CG in his movies, but he always pushes to build giant sets and to build as many elements in there when he could easily just do it all in CG. Some of the Marvel movies, there's 6 people standing in a big giant green screen stage and everything around them is completely recreated. They do that for a lot of stuff, but I think the tendency is to go back now to the beginning, and there's a charm about it and there's a realness about it, and I think people can get reconnected to it. You won't tune out as much it's easy to tune out when you see this animated thing. You go, cartoon, it's not there. You know, but
Well,
when you
with-
make eye contact on screen with an actor looks, they're thinking it, right?
Well, give you an example.
Emotion.
Like when I was a kid, one of my favorite movies that I remember was I was a big Wolfman fan. I remember the original Lon Chaney Wolfman, and when he metamorphoses from the human, how they have the hair grow, and yeah, today it looks silly, but then when you saw him in the full mask. And he moved like a human. It was real. And I'll tell you what, it scared me. It scared me because
It was horrifying.
I was never scared of King Kong or Godzilla or anything like that because I'm like, look, they're giant. I could see them coming from miles away. But the Wolfman. He was the character that really scared me, and it was because the makeup was so good. The suit was so good, and
He came through that makeup though. Lon Chaney Jr., the actor, came through the makeup.
yeah.
And is it interesting? They did a real simple visual effect, special effect that today we don't even think about. Is they had him strapped down to a board, and they literally glued hair on him and shot some footage, glued hair on, did coloration, and he kind of froze his face in between, and they just dissolved them all together. So he would grimace and he would growl and close his mouth. They'd put some more and he'd growl again and look around. Then he'd stick the rubber nose on. And if you watch it now, you can see it dissolves. But back in the day, we didn't understand what we were seeing. You know, we knew movies, but we didn't think in terms of those are 24 frames and you could put things over top because you didn't want to know the technology. It's like cell phones. How the hell do they work? We don't. I still don't know. But back then, we kind of didn't know, and so you could get lost in the sauce there. But the actor came through the makeup. And it is scary because it's tangible. He could be there. But like you said, Godzilla. Well, I can see him. Okay, we got about 6 hours, and that thing is going to be here. Okay, let's load up the car and go. I mean, who dies under Godzilla's foot? I mean, it makes no sense, right?
Right.
If you deserve to get crushed by Godzilla if you didn't hear him or see him 2 states away.
That's very true.
Right? Sure.
So I was just watching. I'm
But
not
the
going to
human monster, the human turning into a monster. You know, everybody has that in them where, you know, you could blow up and get mad at someone, or you could attack someone, or your emotions. When you saw the Wolfman, you went, oh, he can't control his emotions. He's turning into that, and the animal, the beast, is coming out.
I was just watching. I'm not going to plug somebody else's movie, but I was watching a movie on Sci-Fi, and there's a creature, and it's completely CGI, and it's not scary because there's not that you can tell it's CGI. It's just not scary. Whereas if they would have went with somebody in the suit, I think would have been really scary.
Yeah, because even though Paul Bunyan is axe murderer is not real, there's still somebody that played Paul Bunyan axe murderer out there who's big and can be mean, and you're just like, man, you could actually walk through the door, at some point.
Well,
and he's right there.
In these movies we make too, real quickly in them, these genre movies, they're made, whether they're made independently or from a studio or a company, it's all designed to make a profit. And so they crunch the numbers and they go, okay, do we spend $35,000, $40,000 on a CG monster that'll pass, that's not going to be the greatest, and get it done? Or do we spend $28,000 and make a rubber suit and spend another 4 or 5 days on a set? So they weigh the options. I tend to look at it like, because I can do all these visual effects, I go, well, that's not a crutch. That's a Band-Aid. I like it when the visual effects are used and I don't know they're there, And I think when I started out, we used to do a lot of commercial work, and we'd have to do things on sets where we flew a chair or props and stuff. We'd hang them on wires, or we'd try to have a hidden rod or whatever. We always had the problem of not seeing it. Well, today you can pick up a chair you can have a little pole coming off the back, and we can erase that little pole. Mm-hmm. But the tangible chair is there someone could grab, right? So that's what I like about with the visual effects and things today, is to use it as the blend to take the tangible things and get them together, the creature, the monster, whatever it is, and bring them into the scene, or to enhance a few things. not to just be.
So you could actually you could CGI a chair and throw it, but
Yeah.
rather what you'd do is
I'd hang it on a wire,
yeah,
or I'd pick it up
and then just
put a green glove on, pick it up from behind, and flail it through the air and drop it, and then have a little bit of the background, and I'd raise my hand. You know, like they did in Forrest Gump. You know, Lieutenant Dan. They put like green screen pantyhose on his legs, and they took his legs out to make it look like he didn't have legs. But that's a real actor with a real wheelchair,
Sure.
and he gets out of that, gets on that the edge of the boat, and jumps into the water. And they just took his legs out, and you're buying it, and you're like, that's not a CG guy, that's a real actor there. To me, that's the best way to use these visual effects, is just to help to tell that story, but to not be the story, you know.
So tell us, how did you finally get to Hollywood? How did you go from being the kid with the 8mm?
Before you get going, Jason, do you want to talk about your favorite Gary Jones movie? Because I think that's probably one of his first big movies. I mean, here's your chance to geek out, Jason, and talk about
I've
your
been
favorite.
fortunate, and I've had that opportunity to geek out. I've had that opportunity to go to a convention when it was released on DVD, sit with Gary, and actually talk to him through this film under the duress and harassment of being there with Chris Hahn. And it was great.
No, what's the name of the movie? So
Mosquito.
Mosquito.
It
Okay.
is one of the best movies. I recommend that you watch it. It is one of the best, I like to call them bug movies. And it was actually, they weren't CGI bugs. They were actually models. So it goes back, just like the judge. That's all the time we have for this week, folks. But tune in next week for the conclusion of this insightful interview with Gary Jones and Chris Hahn. I'm looking forward to it, aren't you? But for now, let me turn you over to your host, Shane Grove, with a word from this week's sponsor.
We here at From the Shadows podcast would like to welcome a new sponsor this week, Katona Realty. I'm here checking out a house with agent Danny Holt. Man, this place really looks nice. I wonder where Danny's at. Well, I guess this place is already taken. 1428 Elm Street? Okay. All right. Well, if you want a spectacular house for Halloween, give Danny Holt a call at Katona Realty. Gee, I hope this next place at Crystal Lake is a whole lot nicer.
Ladies and gentlemen, a final word. Please visit us on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/From the Shadows Podcast, and on our Instagram page at instagram.com/From the Shadows Podcast. You can visit our webpage at FromTheShadowsPodcast.GoDaddySites.com, or contribute to our Facebook discussion page called After the Shadows, and tweet us on our Twitter feed at twitter.com/podcast_from. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you all. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.